Indiana Jones. I always knew someday you'd come walking back through my door. What's going on, guys? I'm Chris, and welcome back to another video. So today I have a heavy, in-depth spoiler review of Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny. Now, I have a lot of thoughts, so this video is spoiler-filled. If you have not seen it, drop a like, come back, and then watch the rest of this video. But it's not, if you haven't seen it, you're not safe. Spoilers ahead. I'm going to give you a final countdown. 3, 2, 1, you've been warned. Before I get in this thing, though, hit that like button, comment down below your spoilers-filled thoughts on the movie, subscribe and hit that notification bell, and of course, check out my Patreon link down below. I just revamped it. I've got a Discord over there where we're talking indie spoilers. We got early videos, extra videos, all that stuff, so check it out. Your support goes a very long way. But let's go ahead and dive right in, and I'm not going to sit here and recap every major plot point in the movie because that's frankly a waste of time, and you guys have seen the movie. There's no need for me to do that, so I'm going good old-fashioned pros and cons list. I hinted at a lot of things in my review that I could not further elaborate on, and that is what this video essentially will be used for, talking spoilers. Let's start with the positives, though, the pros. So I alluded to this when I talked about it in both the ranking and review, which you guys should check out if you have not. The opening action scene is incredible. It takes place on a train. I thought the de-aging technology with Indy was solid. I really did, and I know a lot of people have been over-critiquing that, but it's nothing new. I mean, we've seen, hell, in Star Wars, we saw de-aged Leia, we saw de-aged Grand Moff Tarkin, or not a de-aged Grand Moff Tarkin, like a digital recreation, which is arguably more disturbing. And then even in The Mandalorian, we saw a de-aged Mark Hamill. None of those were perfect, so of course I didn't expect perfection with the de-aging, but it was fine. There was a few shots where like he would be flailing, like he's actually in a noose in the beginning, and he's like flailing around, and we see his face almost like unaligned for a second. It was a little weird, but regardless, I wasn't like taken out of the movie. I obviously knew it was going to look a little artificial at times, and I was fine with it. It really worked. Felt like we were watching a young Indiana Jones right after Last Crusade. In fact, I am on the train of I'm okay if they want to make more indie movies after Last Crusade with de-aged Harrison Ford. I know they won't. This is the final indie film, and they make that pretty clear with the final shot of the movie, which we'll talk about later. But I was on board with that opening action scene. It was riveting. It felt like a young, charismatic Indiana Jones, and it just fully clicked for me, honestly. That was the standout action scene for me, but then we get this scene in New York City where we see old man Indy, Professor Indy, riding a horse in a chase scene, and it was, for his age, like it was a cool little action scene. And then the big one everyone's talking about is the Tangier chase, which is like more so in the end of first act into the second act. That was fine, but I cannot tell a lie. That action scene to me was always a little underwhelming and a little generic for Indiana Jones, which kind of is a segue into one of my bigger issues with the movie. We can talk pros and cons simultaneously in this video. I felt the movie was lacking when it comes to practical, realistic set pieces and just the grand scale of set pieces. Like, I remember just being in awe when I first watched Raiders and I saw that opening scene, or, you know, even the Well of Souls. That's like a grand, realistic set piece. Then you go into Temple of Doom, everything with the thuggies. It's like, oh my God, this is practical and real. And then you even go into Last Crusade and you've got these magnificent set pieces. Even in Crystal Skull, they're there. In this movie, it was lacking. Like, the whole middle act is underwater, pretty much. Not about 10-15 minutes of it. But that was an underwhelming set piece. They're going diving to try and find the Graphicos, which is this like tablet they can use to translate in order to find the other half of the Dial of Destiny. And it was basically, if you turned on that part of the movie, you would not know what you're watching. It was CGI heavy, and it did not work for me at all. That was the first like red flag for me, actually, where I started to question if I was really enjoying this movie or not, was when they go and they meet with Antonio Banderas, who, by the way, his role is so minor in this film. I don't even know why they cast him. It was just like a waste of him even being in it. But he's like this diver. I think his name's like Ronaldo, and they go down and they're exploring to try and find the Graphicos, and that's that. That is like one of their big set pieces in an Indiana Jones movie. Is they're diving in, it's kind of these murky waters. You can hardly even tell who's who, which was a really big issue that I honestly had. So that was a problem. I will say that the score in the movie was excellent. John Williams came back, and it was beautiful hearing renditions of like the original indie theme, but also Marion's theme, which is another pro I have. I really like the fact that they brought Karen Allen back to play Marion. You know, early on in this movie, Indy is established as someone who's not in the best place. he's sort of going through this divorce. It's a complicated situation, is the way I would use to describe it at the beginning of the movie. And then we find out later that he lost Mutt. His son enlisted and he was killed. So rest in peace, Mutt Williams. They killed off Shia LaBeouf. I mean, we kind of saw this one coming. He wasn't going to be in the movie, so they either had to, like... That's really actually the only route they could have gone, is killing off his son. And the acting in that scene in particular, it's as we sort of start to transition into the second act, we see Helena and Indy on the boat, and Helena says, like, if you could time travel, like, what would you do? And he says, essentially, I would stop my son from enlisting because of the grief that it gave his mother, and ultimately, like, tore our relationship apart, our marriage. And that was like, oh my gosh, the acting from Harrison Ford there hit right in the feels. Like, that's the scene where I tear up the most in this movie. It got me good, and Harrison Ford committed, and I have to commend him for that. There's that scene in particular where his acting's great. At the end of the movie, when we do see his reunion with Marion, that was fantastic because it was filled with sweet callbacks. At the end of the movie, basically the final moments of this film is Indy and Marion happy, reunited, and we get a callback to in Raiders when Indy is like pointing to where it hurts. We see Marion pointing to where it hurts, and it's just a beautiful, like, full circle moment for their relationship. And that's where, again, the John Williams score comes into play, because we hear, like, Marion's theme player there. It was beautiful. I really couldn't have envisioned a better way to end this particular movie, especially with the current state of Indy. But then I kind of, take a look at everything else, and I'm like, does the end of 5 differ that much from the end of 4? Meaning Crystal Skull versus Dial. And to me, Indiana Jones is a character at the very end of Crystal Skull. He gets married to Marion, walks off into the sunset, he's all happy. They do this little fake out where they're going to set up Shia as Mutt as, like, the new Indy. That obviously never happens. Then at the end of this movie, Indy is happily, in his relationship with Marion, and they kiss and basically ride off into the sunset. Like, that to me shows that, like, the character journey for Indy was just not that necessary. And I stand by that. I'd be willing to discuss that in the comments, but the end of 4 to end of 5, Indy's character didn't go on some, like, life-changing journey. Yes, it was explored throughout the movie that he was viewing life differently and not as happy as he once was, and the world around him is changing, and he's on the way out. But that's not something that was really necessary, in my opinion. So anyway, that's just something I think. The ending is sweet. We zoom in on the hat where he grabs it one last time. That was another really sweet callback. And the movie in general, there's a callback to pretty much every film. I'm going to run down the ones that I think of off the top of my head. Number 1, Temple of Doom. When they're climbing up near the third act, Helena and Indy, he's talking about how he was tortured with voodoo and, drank the blood of Kali. That's a callback to Temple of Doom. And then you've got the callback to Raiders not long after, where Helena and Indy are walking through and they have all these bugs all over them, which is just like when the tarantula, the spiders are on Satipo and Indy's back in the opening of Raiders. You've got the callback to Crusade with the line where he's talking about the Graphicos after they retrieve it, and he's like, it belongs in a museum. And there's even callbacks to Crystal Skull with Mutt being involved in the picture. So all around, it pays respect to the previous entries in the franchise. And it does feel, like, sweet to be a hardcore fan of this franchise, because it has moments to love. But I cannot talk about this movie without talking about the elephant in the room, and I've been dancing around it since I hit record on this video. Time travel is canon in Indiana Jones, and he, along with Voller and the rest of the crew in this movie, end up traveling back to, I believe, like 214 BC, and it's like the siege of Syracuse, I believe, where Archimedes, this was all set up early on, like Indy's teaching a lecture in college, and he's talking about this, and Helena's in the audience, and it's very much foreshadowing what's to come. However, it was so, I hesitate to say out of left field, because they definitely foreshadow it, but the fact that they actually committed to time travel in Indiana Jones still shocks me. I'm trying to wrap my brain around it, because I hinted at this in my out-of-theater action in my review. People love to hound on Crystal Skull and rag on the movie because of aliens, and the fact that at the end there's a spaceship and it sends these aliens home, whatever, right? That never really irked me too much, because aliens could definitely exist, There is something out there, and believe in them or not, we've seen media that tackles aliens. There's even, like, not proof, but in my opinion at least, I think that something shady is happening with extraterrestrial beings, and governments have probably tried to cover it up. That's all I'm trying to say. The concept of aliens existing is not that hard to wrap your brain around, especially when you watch Temple of Doom and there's these ancient stones that have this magical power, or you watch Raiders or Crusade. Religious beliefs aside, it's all supernatural, so aliens never irked me that much. Then we come into Dial of Destiny, and it's like any semblance of this being realistic is fully out the window. Now, you could call me crazy because you could say the same about the first 4 films, but in a way, those are still based in reality because there's tons of people with these religious beliefs in the first 3 films, and people have religious beliefs in real life. And then you've got aliens, which again, that's a constant debate. Time travel, impossible, and will never be real, in fact, and it's always just been something fun to theorize about. So my issue with this movie is that it is the first Indiana Jones film where I fully lost any sense of, oh, this could maybe happen. It's ridiculous in previous films, I'm aware of that, but this is the one movie where I was like, we have left the Indiana Jones genre, and we are now in just some outlandish action adventure film. This is no longer Indiana Jones. That's where it abandoned the tropes of this franchise to me, is when we committed to the time travel. Because for a lot of this movie, the main villain, Voller, played by Mads Mikkelsen, very one-note villain, might I add, but still a great performance. He is talking about how he's trying to find the dial, and then late in the game, he's like, I'll right the wrongs of Hitler and use this to go back and blah, 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 blah. And it's like, okay, they're not actually going to time travel, though, right? I was so on board with them trying to find the dial, but then it getting destroyed, because that's what I feel like happens with a lot of the other artifacts. The Holy Grail, it doesn't go past the seal in the 3rd movie, and even Indy goes to try and grab it, but he never actually possesses it. The Crystal Skull ends up, sending the aliens home, whatever. And then the Ark of the Covenant, we see the power of the wrath of God, and then it's just locked up. And then you got the stones from Temple of Doom. They go back to the village. The others are lost or destroyed in the river, and that's all she wrote. So the fact that the dial is basically a time travel mechanism, I just don't appreciate that. And then we go to the end of the movie, and Indy's just got the dial at his apartment, and we never see what happens with it. I don't like that. I like to have a solid set-in-stone ending for these artifacts because they're crucial to the main plot, and it just went nowhere, in my opinion. So that frustrated me. But then literally the whole 3rd act, we're in 214 BC, Indy has a literal conversation with Archimedes, and Indiana Jones is contemplating staying in the past, which is just madness to me. I know they've set up that he's fed up with the current world, and he's like, oh, I have nothing to go back to. But to me, and this is my opinion, feel free to talk about it in the comments, the idea that Indiana Jones would no longer want to be in present day and would just want to go live in the Roman time period, it's insane to me. And I did not like that at all. So they end up there, whatever. All the villains die in a pretty rushed manner. And then they end up getting home, but we never see how. And I know that it's easy to assume, oh, they just get in the plane, and the Teddy kid who's never flown a plane but does it perfectly ends up flying them back through the portal. Well, he gets punched in the face by Helena and just wakes up at home, and then there's not even 5 minutes of screen time after that. Marion comes home. We get this sweet moment I talked about earlier. But talk about a rushed finale. Films lately, especially blockbusters, have been extremely rushed in the end. This is another example of that. I felt like there were a lot of loose ends. To me, they set up a lot of things in the first act that never go anywhere. They set up Indy as this murderer, he's framed for murder at his college, and they never really go back to that. I would have just appreciated even if there was a quick news snippet where it was Indiana Jones found innocent, blah, 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 and Voller gets exposed or something, but none of that. It was so disgustingly rushed, in my opinion. That's how I feel. Frustrated, because I had the ability to enjoy a lot of the movie, but the time travel element completely took me out of it, and I've seen it twice now, and I'm a little kinder to it on rewatch, but I still don't appreciate the direction they went. You could have done so many different things with an Indiana Jones film that weren't time travel. That is one thing, the multiverse concept and time travel, all this crap, it has no place anymore in media. Marvel has done it ad nausea, and now all these other fandoms are trying to incorporate it, and I'm just enough is enough. I'm looking at you, Stranger Things. Do not time travel in season 5. please, God, do not time travel, because it's too risky. It becomes this whole thing where you start to question the timelines, it can get confusing, and I'm done with that crap. I don't want that anymore. So, to hell with time travel. Has no place in Indiana Jones, and I don't think that it worked in this movie. So, that's the big red flag. The thing that I said in my non-spoiler content where I was like, this will be the thing that divides people. If you're mad about aliens, this will probably piss you off. Time travel. It's just stupid to me. It has no place. So yeah, that all ended in a bit of a rushed finale. I'd be lying if I said there weren't sweet emotional callbacks, but the dial itself, by far the weakest artifact in this franchise, and I will die on that hill. And the villains were pretty one note as well. Some of the weaker we've seen. There's no Belloc, there's no Mola Ram, and of course it's not even Spalko from Crystal Skull, played by Cate Blanchett. Voller, love Mads Mikkelsen, but I'll be real. He's played some of the most mediocre villains in a long time. He's Caecilius in Doctor Strange. He ends up playing Grindelwald in the Fantastic Beasts movies. And then you've got this, Voller. He just plays one-note villains. His best villain to me, I haven't seen Hannibal, is in Casino Royale. That's like my rant right there. They introduced time travel. You had, 2008 when Crystal Skull came out, and the big, grand final adventure. We're going to send Indiana Jones to 213 BC, because that lines up with everything else we've seen from this franchise. Pisses me off. I'll never get over it probably, but what can you do? I still find enjoyment with other parts of the movie. And one other massive issue I have, is that James Mangold and the creatives, I believe with Lucasfilm, are on record saying they wanted to return to a classic chemistry feel for this movie, meaning Mutt Williams and Indy didn't have great chemistry. We need a great sidekick in Indiana Jones. So they were going to do that in this movie, and they just didn't. Because Helena, who's his goddaughter, Indy's goddaughter, frankly unlikable for a lot of this movie. And I've seen that's not a hot take. A lot of people have messaged me saying, yes, she was unlikable for a lot of this movie. How can you take away the chemistry of Indy and his son? They had such great chemistry, and replace it with this, and then the Teddy character. These are underwhelming, forgettable side characters. I'm honestly just baffled by the fact that this movie has such high highs, but at the same time really low lows. Again, the score, the callbacks, there's some cool action. The opening action and the whole de-aging Indy worked. And the end of the film, the final moments worked. But the entire third act goes really off the rails. I can't do it. The time travel, it'll take me out of the movie every time I watch it. It's just goofy. It's so goofy. So, yeah, Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny is a movie that I do enjoy, but it's one of those movies that will either I'll never watch it, as we age. I'll be like, oh, I'll probably just never watch that again, or I'll just soften on it over time. And I'm interested to see how time affects this movie. Kind of ironic, because that's such a big concept of the film itself, time. But Dial of Destiny, I enjoyed it slightly more on my rewatch, but I'm still fairly underwhelmed by it, if that makes sense. It's my least favorite indie film. That doesn't mean it's a bad movie, but it definitely has its flaws. But that's what I got. That's my spoiler talk for Dial of Destiny. I'm sure I forgot to mention some stuff in there. It's a 2.5 hour movie, for Christ's sake. So let me know down below your spoiler thoughts. Let's talk about the spoilers down there. Hit that like button, subscribe, and hit that notification bell to help me reach my goal of 80,000 subscribers. And if you want to keep talking spoilers, join the Patreon link down below. We got a Discord going as one of the perks where we're talking spoilers over there. But Dial of Destiny has its pros, has its cons. Enjoyable enough, but it could have been so much more. That's all I got for you guys. Thank you for watching, and until next time, see you guys later.